The blood moon had finally arrived, casting an eerie red glow over Moria's garden as she stood by her new pewter cauldron. The air crackled with magic, the kind that only came around once every 2 years. Moria had been waiting for this moment, knowing that the blood moon's energy would make her next spell more potent than ever. With her new spell book in hand, she flipped through its pages, eyes scanning the instructions carefully. This was the spell that would help her finally find what she had lost. Either her brother's skull, full of knowledge, or her missing wand. She needed one of them to regain her former power and clear the fog that had clouded her mind since their sibling rivalry had torn them apart. Wiley the complaining coyote, who had once promised to help find the lost items, had failed miserably, as usual. His whining and complaining were no help, and now Moria had to take matters into her own hands. The spell she had prepared was one of great power, but it had a peculiar condition. The first sound she heard after the potion was complete would determine what creature or being was enhanced to help her search. If I'm lucky, it'll be something strong, like the roar of a lion or the strength of a rhino, Moria muttered, stirring the bubbling brew. Whatever makes the sound will be enhanced stronger, faster, more capable of finding my wand or the skull. She stood over the cauldron, watching the red light of the blood moon reflect off the surface of the potion. She had done everything right. This time there would be no mistakes. She would finally get back what was hers. The summoning of the called would be the difference maker tonight. As the potion neared completion, Moria stood still, waiting for the first sound to emerge. Her heart raced with anticipation. Would it be the fierce growl of a predator? The howl of a wolf? The screech of an eagle? But then, from the treetops above her, a familiar sound broke the silence. A soft, almost comical hoot echoed through the night air. "Who's you?" Moria's heart sank as she looked up and saw the source of the sound. The goofy owl perched on a branch above her. It was the same owl that had always wandered her forest, known more for its clumsy flying and silly expressions than any kind of predatory skill. "No, not him," Moria groaned, watching in dismay as the spell took hold. The owl's feathers ruffled, and his eyes glowed a fierce yellow as the magic coursed through him. His wingspan grew, stretching wide and powerful. His claws, once small and stubby, sharpened into fearsome talons. His entire form seemed to transform into something majestic and terrifying. For a moment, Moria's hope flickered. "Maybe this will work after all," she whispered, watching the newly transformed owl. "Maybe he'll actually find the wand or the skull." The owl let out a piercing screech and swooped down from the tree. His eyes narrowed in fierce determination. He circled the garden once, twice, and Moria felt the thrill of power surging through the air. This was it. This was her moment. The spell had worked. But then, as quickly as it had begun, the spell began to unravel. The owl's wings shrank back to their normal size, his talons dulled, and his glowing yellow eyes faded back to their usual comical light blue. With a confused hoot, the owl landed awkwardly on the ground, looking no more fearsome than a barnyard chicken. "Who's you?" he hooted again, blinking up at Moria. Moria clenched her fists, barely holding back a scream of frustration. The mighty owl, her fierce predator, had lasted all of 5 minutes before reverting to his usual goofy self. He flapped his wings clumsily and flew back up to the tree, settling in as if nothing had happened. Her potent spell, powered by the blood moon's rare energy, had failed spectacularly, wasted on this goofy owl. Moria stared at her cauldron in defeat, the blood moon's glow doing little to lift her spirits. She had been so certain that this time would be different, that this time she would finally reclaim what had been lost. But once again, her magic had backfired, and she was left with nothing but her disappointment. She didn't even bother heading to the Chicken Town market this year. What was the point? There were no pumpkins to sell, no victory to claim. Instead, she retreated to her cottage, where she threw herself a pity party, with only Daniel Thorne in attendance. Daniel Thorne, ever sarcastic and lazy, lounged by the fire, purring with satisfaction. He thrived in moments like this when Moria's failures fed into his own sense of superiority. "I told you," The blood moon's just a big show, Daniel Thorne said with a yawn. You always get your hopes up for nothing. Moria shot him a glare, but she couldn't muster the energy to argue. Instead, she sank into her chair, flipping through her spell book in search of something that could explain why her spells kept going wrong. In the days that followed, Moria tried to distract herself by focusing on something different. Maybe it wasn't her magic that was failing her. Maybe it was the spell book itself. Or maybe it was her eyesight. My eyes aren't what they used to be, Moria muttered as she squinted at the tiny print of her beginner's spellbook. Maybe that's why I keep messing up the spells. I'm probably missing important details. Determined to fix this new problem, Moria made her way to the local library in search of a spellbook with larger print. She wandered the dusty aisles, her fingers brushing the worn spines of ancient tomes, until she found one that seemed promising. Spells for Dummies, large print edition. This has to help, Moria said to herself as she pulled the book from the shelf. If I can actually see the words, maybe I'll start getting the bruise right. But as she thumbed through the pages, a familiar feeling of doubt crept in. It wasn't just the size of the text that was the problem. Deep down, Moria knew that her failures weren't because of her eyes or her spellbook. Her magic had been faltering for years, ever since she lost her wand. The truth was, until she could reclaim what she had lost, no amount of large print spell books would make a difference. As the days passed, Moria's hope faded further. The blood moon's energy had come and gone, leaving her no closer to finding her wand or the skull. The mighty owl had returned to his goofy self, and Moria was left with nothing but a pile of failed spells and a dwindling sense of purpose. Sitting in her cottage with Daniel Thorne napping nearby, Moria flipped through her new large print spellbook, but the words blurred together, offering no answers. She sighed, closing the book and staring out the window at the fading moon. Maybe next time, she muttered to herself, though the words felt hollow. Each failure seemed to push her further from the witch she used to be. As the blood moon's glow disappeared entirely, Moria knew that once again, she had come up empty-handed. The powerful which she had once been felt like a distant memory, and as long as she kept chasing her lost magic, victory would remain just out of reach.